The Ice Age was killing them one by one. 5.2 million years ago, our ancestors watched helplessly as entire families froze to death during the longest, coldest nights in Earth's history. With no fire, no shelter, and no warm clothing, survival seemed impossible. But one desperate discovery would change everything. Picture Africa 5.2 million years ago. Not the warm savanna we imagine today, but a frozen wasteland gripped by the most severe ice age in Earth's history. Temperatures plummeted to -20 regularly, turning the landscape into a deadly Arctic environment where every breath created clouds of vapor and every step crunched on frozen ground. Our early ancestors, Australopithecus afarensis, had evolved for warm climates. Their thin skin, sparse body hair, and lean builds were perfectly adapted for heat, but utterly defenseless against the killing cold that now dominated their world for months at a time. Every dawn brought new tragedy. Families would wake to find their elderly members stiff and lifeless, frozen solid during the night. Children, with their smaller bodies unable to generate sufficient heat, were disappearing one by one. The youngest and oldest died first, leaving behind grieving parents and siblings who knew they might be next. The group that had numbered over 50 just months before was now down to barely 20 survivors. Each night was a countdown to potential death, and each morning was a miracle for those who still drew breath. Without immediate solutions, the entire species faced extinction within a single brutal winter. The cold was a merciless predator that hunted differently than any creature they knew. It crept silently through their bodies, starting at their extremities and working inward. First, their fingers and toes went numb, then their hands and feet, gradually shutting down their ability to move or function normally. Once the cold penetrated their core body temperature, death became inevitable. They watched helplessly as family members became sluggish, confused, and eventually unresponsive. The cold didn't just kill, it tortured slowly, giving them time to understand exactly what was happening while being powerless to stop it. Desperation drove them to attempt anything that might generate warmth. They rubbed their bodies vigorously until their skin was raw, but the heat generated lasted only minutes. They tried wrapping themselves in large leaves, but the plant material provided almost no insulation against the penetrating cold. Some attempted to bury themselves in dirt and mud, hoping the earth would provide warmth, but the ground itself was frozen solid. Others tried constant movement, running, jumping, dancing, but exhaustion set in quickly, and the moment they stopped, the cold returned with vengeance, often worse than before. Then came the observation that would save humanity. During one particularly brutal night, a mother named Usha was holding her dying infant when she noticed something crucial. When she pressed her warm abdomen directly against the baby's cold skin, the child's breathing stabilized and color returned to its face. This wasn't just brief comfort, it was actual heat transfer that could sustain life. Usha realized that the human body itself was a heat source, and by sharing that heat strategically, they could keep each other alive. What seemed like simple affection was actually a sophisticated survival technology waiting to be discovered and perfected. Usha began experimenting with different ways to maximize heat sharing. She discovered that skin-to-skin contact was far more effective than touching through any covering. The warmest parts of the body, the torso, neck, and inner arms, could transfer the most heat to someone who was dangerously cold. She learned that positioning mattered enormously. Placing a cold person between two warm bodies created a heat sandwich that could bring someone back from the brink of death. The surface area of contact determined how quickly heat could be shared, making full-body warming sessions the most effective life-saving technique. The group began implementing organized huddle formations, with the coldest and most vulnerable individuals placed at the center, surrounded by those who still retained body heat. They learned to rotate positions regularly, ensuring that no one person became too drained of warmth while serving as a heat source. They developed specific huddle configurations for different situations. The tight circle for maximum warmth conservation, the layered formation for protecting children, and the shifting huddle that allowed people to move without breaking the heat-sharing chain. These formations became their primary defense against the killing cold. Beyond body heat sharing, they discovered that certain natural materials could trap warm air around their bodies. Animal fur from their kills, when worn hair side inward, created insulating air pockets that retained heat for hours. Large bird feathers, layered properly, provided surprising warmth and wind protection. They learned to stuff dried grasses and leaves into makeshift coverings, creating primitive insulation systems. Tree bark could be peeled and layered to create wind barriers. Even mud, when dried on the skin, provided an additional barrier against heat loss. though it had to be reapplied regularly as it cracked and fell off. A scouting party discovered something that would revolutionize their survival: a network of natural caves that extended deep underground. The temperature inside these caves remained constant, significantly warmer than the deadly surface conditions. The Earth itself was providing the insulation they desperately needed, but the caves presented new challenges. They were dark, confusing, and potentially dangerous. Strange sounds echoed from the depths, and they had no way of knowing what predators might already call these caves home. Still, the choice between possible danger underground and certain death on the surface made the decision simple. Inside the caves, they experienced relief they hadn't felt in months. The Earth's natural insulation kept the underground temperature around 50 Fahrenheit, still cold by modern standards, but survivable compared to the killing freeze above ground. Their bodies could finally begin to recover from the constant stress of extreme cold. They learned to map the cave system, finding the deepest chambers where the Earth's warmth was most pronounced. Some areas were warmer than others, and they began to understand how underground thermal dynamics worked. The caves became not just shelter, but their winter survival headquarters. An elderly group member discovered that controlled breathing could help maintain core body temperature. By breathing slowly and deeply, warming the air in their lungs before it reached their bloodstream, they could maintain internal heat more efficiently. Quick, shallow breathing actually cooled the body faster. They developed group breathing exercises, synchronizing their respiration to create pockets of warmed air that everyone could share. The technique was especially crucial when venturing outside the caves for food gathering, helping them maintain body heat during necessary exposure to the deadly surface conditions. Survival required unprecedented cooperation. They established rotation schedules for cave warming duties, food gathering expeditions, and guard duties. No individual could survive alone in these conditions, so every person's contribution became essential to the group's survival. Selfishness meant death for everyone. They developed communication systems to coordinate their survival efforts efficiently. Different calls signaled when someone was becoming dangerously cold, when it was safe to leave the caves, or when immediate help was needed. Their social structure evolved rapidly under the pressure of life-or-death cooperation requirements. They discovered that eating more fat from their kills helped their bodies generate internal heat. The group began prioritizing fatty portions of animals, understanding intuitively that fat provided both insulation and fuel for heat production. Those who consumed more fat survived cold nights more successfully. Bodies began adapting to store more fat as winter preparation. They learned to eat heavily during any warm periods, building reserves that would sustain them through the coldest times. This wasn't just about nutrition anymore. It was about creating internal heating systems that could keep them alive when external heat was unavailable. Innovation accelerated under survival pressure. They created heated stone systems, warming rocks during any brief sunny periods and carrying them into caves for radiant heat. They developed primitive clothing from multiple animal skins, layering them to create insulation systems that could maintain body heat for extended periods. Tool use evolved specifically for thermal management. Scrapers for preparing animal hides, diggers for cave expansion, and carriers for heated stones. Every innovation was tested against one simple criterion: does this help us stay warm enough to survive another night in this frozen world? Different family groups began sharing thermal survival techniques, creating knowledge networks that spread life-saving innovations across the population. What one group learned about cave heating, another improved with better insulation methods. Cooperation between groups became essential, as individual families were too small to maintain adequate warmth. They established thermal refuges, specific caves designated as emergency warming stations, where any human could find life-saving heat sharing, regardless of group membership. These refuges saved countless lives and created the first intergroup cooperation protocols based on survival necessity rather than kinship or territory. The Ice Age crisis triggered rapid evolutionary changes. Those who survived developed better cold tolerance, improved fat storage capabilities, and enhanced cooperative instincts. Their bodies began producing more internal heat, and their social behaviors became permanently oriented toward group survival rather than individual competition. Most importantly, their brains evolved under the pressure of complex thermal management, planning for cold seasons, coordinating group activities, and innovating survival technologies required enhanced cognitive abilities. The Ice Age didn't just teach them to survive cold, it forced their species to become smarter, more cooperative, and more innovative than any previous generation. The Ice Age survival techniques developed 5.2 million years ago laid the foundation for human civilization itself. Learning to share body heat taught our ancestors cooperation, creating thermal shelters sparked architectural innovation, storing fat for winter introduced long-term planning, managing group survival developed leadership and social organization. Every challenge they overcame made them more human. When you turn up your thermostat, put on a warm coat, or simply share a blanket with someone you love, you're using survival wisdom that saved our species during the most dangerous period in human history. The techniques that kept our ancestors alive during the African Ice Age became the building blocks of human society, proving that our greatest innovations often come from our most desperate moments.